Transform all your company's milestones, big or small, into impact with Impact Hero. Whether it's a sale, a new hire, a demo booked, or anything else, with Impact Hero, you automatically generate a gift that matters, like a tree planted, a kilo of plastic recovered, or a piece of coral reef restored. Join the hundreds of companies that are already boosting sales and retention while making an impact. Go to impacthero.com/podcast now to get 10% off. Again, that's impacthero.com/podcast to get 10% off. Welcome to another ClimateTech podcast, interviews with the people trying to save us from ourselves. Marco Möller is a serial entrepreneur with a red thread that runs through electrical transportation. Today, he's focused on open sourcing the world of EV charging. I reached Marco at home between Karlsruhe and Heidelberg in Germany. I'm Ryan Grant Little. Thanks for being here. Marco, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ryan, for having me. Really looking forward to this.
You're a computer scientist and physicist by background, as well as a serial entrepreneur who sold a company to Intel. So first of all, not bad. You're doing pretty well, it looks like. When did you know that you wanted to combine your passion for technology with entrepreneurship? You're still quite a young guy.
Yeah, maybe I look like that. I don't know. At least when I was 20, I always had to show my passport in clubs. That was annoying. Yes, how do I get there? My dad was a farmer, and then he transitioned to becoming a trader for beekeeping equipment. And that was when I was 5. And then I started helping in the shop, selling stuff to people. At the same time, I was super interested in tech. And I really early on had the idea like, no, I want to build something myself. And continuing the shop of my dad. So in a way, I guess it started really early.
Okay, so you're a computer scientist, physicist, and beekeeper, I should add to it.
Yes.
You're running that as a teenager then, or what?
Yeah, at least I was running a beekeeping shop as a teenager, but I also still have some beehives, yeah.
Very cool. Okay, and I mean, how did you shift from that and getting involved in technology? What was your first technology play?
In school, 7th, 8th grade, I was always doing coding in my free time. I even started earlier. And then after 10th grade, I had to decide what kind of job I learned. Do I go the high school, university route or not? And I had really bad grades in languages. So almost had to repeat some classes. So decided, okay, let's go a detour on the way to university and go with some technical education first. Yeah, then it went technical because it was just way more interesting than just learning how to trade goods. That kind of I was already doing before. So I decided for adding on the tech route. And within that, I learned how to fix car radios at Bosch, Blaupunkt back then. What was really catch me on fire was a teacher coming there and asked like, interesting, you have all these people learning the job here. Do you want to make them participate in some competition? So we have this Jugendforsch in Germany, which is all about making your own science or tech project and then presenting it to a jury. And that was amazing. And this is the kind of folks I'm still working with, literally.
Okay, very cool. And so with the car radios, you had this kind of hardware drive at the beginning. We'll talk about the project you're working on now in just a moment, but I want to hear a bit about the company that you sold to Intel, which was a drone software company called Mavinci, which is an awesome name. So M-A-V-Inci. And tell us a bit about what it did. And I'm curious, I've, over the past couple of years, for a variety of reasons, gotten really interested in drones myself. What possibilities do you see for drones today in the fight against climate change 8 years after you sold the company?
Okay, so many questions at once. So how do we get into drones? Again, this young scientist double, a friend of mine from there was always hobbyist, remote plane pilot, and he wanted to automate that just for a fun project. And then he got a professor convinced that this is his diploma thesis. And then afterwards it was done and it was too sad to throw it away. So he asked some friends if we should make a company out of it. And we did. That turned out into Mavinci. Back then, drones have been called micro air vehicles, so MAV. That's where the name was coming from. Naming is so hard, believe me. And also everyone thinks you're an Italian company if you call yourself Mavinci. Anyway, so fast forward, we mainly worked in mapping and construction. So a lot of, let's say, big roadsides, big civil engineering things, bridges, and a lot of that. On top of that, a lot of mining. So I think Our first customers have been all from Australia, this big coal mines, making 3D mapping so they know where to dig next and how to dig there. So in a way, it was bad for climate change, I would say. Then we sold the company 2016 to Intel, had an interesting ride with another drone company they acquired to try to scale this. Then our entire industry got disrupted by open source. So that's a bridge to my next topic, what I'm doing in the future. But also, in a way, we got sick of drones. We want to do the next shiny thing. Drones turned out to be so complicated if you want to go out of a niche because of all of that regulation. I think, in a way, the war is now accelerating this entire drone stuff quite a bit because I would say near to front lines on military use, no one cares about certification, or you have different processes at least. And money also is, let's say, more flexible. And I hope this will, let's say, shine back to the civil side and do some improvements there. And fighting climate change, hard to tell. I think drones are in a way a bit overinflated. But what I'm really looking forward is electric aviation in general. So let's say bigger drones. Not about so much, let's say, replacing every public omnibus or a tube with drones. That's crazy ideas. This will not fly. But regional aircrafts, all this, especially in this low density countries, Northern Europe, there's a lot of regional flights. And I know people try to fight them. But if you do then electric, actually, I think it's even better than building additional roads or additional rails because you need way less infrastructure, have to put way less CO2 in concrete and things like that. So I think electric aviation, if you scale it up and use it properly and replacing things which are nasty, that can be a big thing. And I think the drones can be, are a forefront of that. So I've seen that in my career.
I had Maxime Myers, the CEO and founder of S2Air, on the podcast recently, and he has founded this new platform for reducing, especially contrails, and reducing kind of the climate impacts of aviation currently. But he spent most of his career at Airbus working on the vertical takeoff and landing electrical kind of vehicles. And it sounds like there's a lot of interest there industry-wide, and we'll see these, especially for trips to the airport, funnily enough.
So I think in general, this is a bit overinflated, the drone story, but there are exciting things. Commute, maybe, I think I would personally more bet on the regional transportation instead of, taking 1% of the cars off the road. If you have the road already there, just stick with cars or buses or tubes or whatever. That's just way more scalable. I think this drone thing is, this urban transportation in air is not as scalable as people hope it will be. But regional flights replacing that, I'm totally all in. And there's another interesting side effect. Now that the founder I learned on my way also sold his company to Intel, is now building electric boats and with foiling, and you can remove 90% of the drag, make it way more fuel efficient. But it's a complex regulation or steering problem, how to control the flaps and the foils. And this seems to be similar to what he's done in drones before. So in a way, you can make transitionality transfer also to, non-air parts.
And okay, so let's get to the heart of the matter, what you're working on right now, which is electric vehicle charging. Before we talk too much about the project itself, what do people need to know about the EV market in Europe? So is it still growing? Is the price dropping relative to traditional vehicles?
So it's growing, but there's some countries where it's doing less well and some countries where it's doing amazing. So I think growth has a bit slowed down. In general, there's a robust growth. Germany has a bit of decline. I think Italy has a lot of decline, and I think everyone else is doing quite well. I think Germany has a mood problem, so we abruptly had to cancel all subsidies because of some highest court ruling regarding governmental spending. They had to cut somewhere in panic mode. But interestingly, what happened at the same time, I think within a couple of months, electric vehicles have been at the price point without subsidies as they have been with subsidies before. So the price dropping is fast now. So the really thing what's holding us back is a mood and perception in Germany. And I think in Italy, so from what I read, this is kind of orchestrated by the government that try to keep it as small as possible. Yeah, and everyone else who has not so much vested interest in vehicles is doing actually better than us. And I think in US, I heard similar things, that it's growing, but let's say slower than expected. But I think globally, it's doing amazing. If you look on what surprises me quite a bit is that this global south is really, really catching up way faster than expected. like Brazil, 1,100% annual growth rate.
Huh.
So they will, be faster than Germany in a year. That's my prediction.
So I'm thinking of a cartoon that was on your LinkedIn profile that illustrates this point pretty well. But if there's a listener who's thinking about switching from a traditional car to an electric car and is worried about the things we're used to hearing about, like range, charging time, these other hesitations, what would you say to them now in 2024? I work with a lot of companies who plan to open up shop in or expand across Europe. My one big piece of advice: don't fall into the trap of setting up a new entity right away. Instead, talk to my friends at Paracar, who can help you get up and running without all the costs, not to mention the legal and HR hassle. When I was hiring in different EU countries, I wanted my team to focus on their work, not on the country's bureaucracy. After interviewing a half dozen international expansion firms, I chose Paracar because they were by far the most knowledgeable and they're great people. Whether you're a large multinational looking to expand abroad, a small business looking for the right talent, or a contractor, they'll sort it out. Book a free, no-obligation consultation right now at paracar.eu/climate. That's PARAKAR.eu/climate.
I'm driving electric for, 5 years now, and a lot of my friends, and there's like a few simple rules, like don't charge at really, really old fast chargers because they're typically broken. It's part of the problem we try to fix. And you typically can see it at the power rating. 50 kilowatts don't go there. That's the old ones. But this is only a very few percentage, like 2, 3. The majority of the infrastructure is new and well working, or way better working. So you have to get used to it a bit in the beginning. Like in the first, road trip might be an adventure, like first time driving cross nations. But from the second time, it gets boring. And the total cost of ownership, especially if you're living not in a city, but in the suburbs where you can park at home, it's so much lower with electricity cost. And especially if you can charge at home or at work, this is really going well. And if you look on the electricity prices, there are some numbers out there in the media, how expensive it can be, but it can also be really, really cheap if you just going once on the comparison site and picking a cheap contract. I think it's cheaper to drive electric. I think the range anxiety is totally not there, not justified. I have a car with just 400 kilometer range, and this is, I would say, the lower end of what I would recommend. And typically the car holds longer than me or my family. So typically we're not charging because we had to charge, but because someone had to go to the toilet, need some food, need some fresh air. I think that's reasonable where the cars are. And it's evolving quickly. Price-wise, there's some incredible price drops ahead we hear from China, from the battery market, which will then penetrate over, I would say, next year or so into the car market. This is really kicking off in the next years.
So the charging infrastructure is getting better, but it still remains quite proprietary. And that's kind of where you're stepping in to open source the space. So your company, Pionix, you've created a software platform called Basecamp that you call also an open source EV charging OS or operating system. So maybe talk for those of us who haven't experienced this at the charging pump or the charging stations along the way. What does the infrastructure look like, and why is it not open sourced yet?
So first of all, charging is quite different than fueling. I mean, charging, you're basically putting a pipe into another pipe and mechanically had to fit. Then you can press a button and some liquid flows through. So there's no, let's say, advanced digital things going on. For charging, basically your car and the charging station are connecting over, let's say, a data link and exchanging data. And then the charging station is connecting to the internet and exchanging data for payment and for authorization and whatnot. And this makes it technically a bit more challenging. But from the user experience, typically you just have a payment card, go to the charging station, swipe it, press a button which cable you want to use and plug it in, and then it starts charging. Except the cases where it fails for whatever reason. Yeah, so it could be quite unspectacular. Why is it not open source yet? Maybe coming back to my drone history. So, and also did my research, you can see this pattern all over the place. Whenever something new emerged, like a computer or a phone or whatever, a company invests quite some money to make it work. So they want to sell it, including the software. Over time, it gets boring because 1,000 companies have done it. then there are standards in place. So every car and every charging station are compatible. So you can't do whatever you want. You're anyway restricted by the technology effects out there. Like when you're programming a new web browser, you still have to be compatible with every fucking website out there. So you can't do whatever you want. You have to work with the environment. And when you're in such an, let's say, grown-up market, a lot of this work and software development is actually, in a way, wasted because it's commoditized. So everyone can do it. You're not special. Yay, I can charge a car. Guess what? You're one of 1,000 charging station providers. This is the one job you had to do. So you can't win with that argument. I have software to charge a car. So when it's not worth it in commodity, but at the same time, super hard and complicated to solve and fastly evolving, then you need collaborative approaches, and you can just share that work among the companies and can accelerate the entire industry, and you're not losing anything, you're just winning. And I think, in my opinion, it's a natural evolution you see in a lot of industries when they mature.
And so it's, nobody wants to be the beta. Everyone wants to be the VHS and make sure that they're sticking around and not having this very expensive proprietary thing that's going to fail because it's not compatible with everything else.
Yeah. So I think from the user perspective, end of the day, you should just not care. You just plug in your cable, it charges. And our promise would be, it really charges every single time. It's not fading with any weird car. And just, because you buy the early bird customers for this new Chinese BYD car should not mean you're suffering out there charging. Or you just approached on this new charge pole from this new company entering the market, had little experience how to do that. That should not giving a downside to you. So what our approach at the moment is we are going to all the charging station vendors and helping them to do the software and, let's say, the base layer of the software. So they, on top of that, do all the juicy custom stuff, what makes them special, and we take care of the boring things. Yeah, and you mentioned open source. We're not doing that alone, because what we're ultimately doing here is having one piece of software, and it should, in a way, become a monopole. So everyone is using it. But we don't want to go the Windows route where everyone hates you at the end, but just can't go away because it's the standard. We want to go the, let's say, Linux route where this has the, 90% penetration on servers. And then there's an incredible large ecosystem of players out there who, whenever something is missing or is wrong there, you just change it. And sure, there's commercial companies out there who can help you with keeping it stable, like Red Hat or SUSE or Ubuntu Canonical and all those companies. Yeah, want to be one of those, but just specialized on charging. People can go with us, but they can also go with a pure open source track, which is also not only by us, by, I think, meanwhile, more than 300 engineers actively contributed, and it's maybe 15 for my folks. It's, I think, more than 50 organizations contributed. So this is not hobbyist stuff. This is people doing that for a living because their employees paying them to contribute at Everest at the open source project we do.
So the charging station companies are your customer and you're selling to them, you're selling software to them. Have they already made the purchase decision that they want to be open source and compatible with everything else? Or do you have to convince them to do that rather than sort of their own proprietary protocol?
So if the protocols are anyway not proprietary, it's just the code which speaks that language. So in a way, we're in a situation where everyone agreed to speak English, but you have a lot of weird dialects out there. So let's say the language is standardized, but your interpretation of it, I also studied for a while in UK, and really we had issues with understanding the people not from the greater London area. So in a way, this is how charging station currently fail. Yeah, everyone should speak the same language, but it's slightly different, so they fail. And we just want to harmonize that with not only sharing the documentation how to speak the language, but with the code doing it. And what is about hesitation? So this idea is new into this industry. It had been there before for servers, for phones, for databases, or for drones. So you see it in waves. Like first, everyone is doing their own thing, and then there's a later wave for open source eats up the market. And we created that wave here for charging. So before, everyone just hadn't the idea that this could be a thing. But we really, really pushed hard to make it happen. And now you can see this avalanche or tsunami of change evolving, which we try to write. And we have a lot of, let's say, governmental support, like the US government or the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation has some engineers working with us. We have support from, for example, Californian government and officials. We replicated something soon, something, I'd say, in a way similar with Asia. Can't speak too much about that yet. And then there's a lot of vendors. Many of them are still in stealth mode, just doing their thing with us and silently contributing. But a couple of them are already quite vocal that they think this is the future. And then the technology cycles are slow. Typically, you start migrating to this new software whenever you anyway do a big change, so launching new product lines. And this is, I would say, done every 2 years or so. So it takes some years to penetrate the market.
So some of this stuff you're doing with the company and some you're doing with this association where you're a board member. Is that right? Is that sort of more of the stakeholder environmental building work that you're doing with them?
Yeah, in a way. So we are a little bit way with different animal than a lot of the startups out there. Normally, as a startup, you sell your products. We will first of all give all our products out there for free and try to earn money with that. I think that makes us special. And then normally you have to build a product, you have to build up a custom base and sell it. So we have to do one step further. We have to build an open source community and get that running. And on top of that, we can behave like a normal startup. But this extra thing is, I think, where you also meant up to. Like, yes, I'm CEO of Pionix and I'm selling things, but then I have a second, third, and fourth head where I'm head of the chair of the technical steering committee of the Everest project. I just got elected yesterday as one of the board members from the Linux Foundation Energy. I'm elected board member for the Open Charge Alliance, so one of these institutions doing those standards. So yes, you have to be quite influential out there and help the industry to evolve and shape itself.
Yeah, when you're building the market, you have to be bringing your competitors all under one tent as well and trying to agree on some of the basic rules of the game.
Yeah. So in a way, I think there's very little competition for what we do. I think there have been a year ago like 5-ish competitors who purely made money with something like we do. A lot of others anyway have been hybrid, and for them it was okay to give up on this piece and just join our forces. And a couple of them already did that. And from this 5-ish we had a year ago, I would say we had to cross out 2 or 3, which stopped doing that. So we anyway see market consolidation. Was again, we're selling things which have a very special value proposition. In a way, it's commodity. On the other hand, it's super hard to make it right. Yeah, and if we now go in there with, let's say, a free approach, it's giving everyone else a hard time. But the majority of the community I'm working with are, let's say, from chip makers, charging station makers, sanitization bodies. So 99.9% of the community out there doesn't see us as a threat, but see us as something welcoming, helping to get this right.
What does the company look like right now? How many people are you? Do you have customers already? Maybe just paint a picture of what a day and the life of Pionix looks like.
We started with this idea like 4 years ago, 3 and a bit years ago. We created the company. We raised so far almost 10 million. And we'll raise further money soon. So that's a classical VC case because you have to be quick. You have to do quite some spending before you see returns. So we thought about bootstrapping this as we bootstrapped before. That wouldn't work with the strategy. We had to invest just too much to get this right. And yeah, we have 34 people, but changing every day, literally. So I think we have like 4 more open positions. 2/3 of that is tech. I would say half of the tech is then committed to just do open source and get the open source community growing. Another third of the company is helping customers to get their product right. So I think there's about 10-ish products which are now underway or just recently launched. For example, from UK, Podpoint, it's one of the bigger charging station manufacturers there. They announced last week that they now had a start of production, and their product they now started to sell is based on Everest or based on Pionix Basecamp to be precisely. Yeah, then even the 1/3 non-tech people, half of them are doing community work like me, sitting committees, organizing conferences, working groups, and help the basically project management cross companies and cross continents.
Is there anyone who's trying to prevent you from doing this kind of work, from doing the open sourcing? And I don't know this for a fact, but I'm thinking of an electric car company owned by an entrepreneur who's not extremely well known for collaboration.
Okay, I couldn't go into that detail, so I couldn't reveal our customer names. But let me put it this way. We see quite the opposite from literally all the car makers out there, what we do here. With some of them, we're working really commercially together. With some of them, it's just more, let's say, technical collaboration, because they also have quite a bit of things to win. At the end of the day, they want to have happy customers. So they want to have charging as easy as possible. We make it way easier for them to test this and to get this right. And as I said, we're working with all international car OEMs together with the engineering teams on testing prototype cars, either officially on so-called testivals, which is kind of a speed dating for cars and charging stations, or also behind the scenes ongoing whenever there's something new. We have also quite cheap charging station emulators or 1 watt megawatt charging systems. So hand carryable charging station where you can try out all the software and see if your, let's say, early prototype car can handle it. And then the last piece to the puzzle is they want to shape the future infrastructure out there. So it's about for them also innovation. How you typically do innovation, either you have a lot of market dominance and try to push something through, but also that is hard and quite money involving. Or you go to committees and convince everyone in the committee to make a change in the standard, then you're debating it for 2-3 years, then you're publishing it, and then you try to hope that everyone implements your standard. And so this is a 10 years journey. Alternatively, you can just let a couple of engineers sit down, make a pull request to Everest, put, let's say, an alternative or add-on into it, and it's rolled out into the market in half a year. So we can accelerate innovation speed by 20-fold in cutting costs down for this dramatically. So also here, I have some examples from car makers who are already using that to push out innovation. And no, there's absolutely no opposition out there.
I'm sorry, I want to hear more about what a testival is.
There's actually 2 different testivals. There's one testival for cars and charging station. They're called Sharon Testival. And it's literally like speed dating. So every car charging station combination get an hour together to see if they can charge, if there's a spark in a way. And then you also have some similar events. They're called Plugfest, where charging station and cloud solution also try to make compatibility testing. So same approach, 20 clouds, 20 charging stations, or however many. And they're getting an hour together and see if they can speak to each other and if things work out. And there, I would say, from each type, for the, in total, 10 of this a year, globally distributed. We try to be at as many as we can from them. We even hosted one of them ourselves in February.
Sounds very romantic. You mentioned you're hiring 4 open positions. I'll definitely link to your LinkedIn and to your website in the show notes. But what else are you looking for to help you further your mission?
We need more engineers. We always need more engineers. And yes, we hire globally, and we even now relocating someone from Australia over to Germany. But we also have people who are working remote. But I think particularly we're now looking for people who want to work hands-on superchargers, wall boxes, and whatever. And therefore also people who are interested to work in the beautiful southwestern area of Germany, next to cities like Heidelberg and Strasbourg. So that is one track. And then on the other track, so far, and actually it's still going amazing, customers are more or less fluing in. But with upcoming Series A and with all the growth, we have to structure our sales and marketing. So also here we're hiring for some more marketing people, some more sales people, and even the chief revenue officer who orchestrates all of that. So as you mentioned, we're physicists and nature scientists by heart. We can do a lot of things. And if I believe to my investors, we're not the sexiest marketeers out there. So maybe it's good to have some more help.
Marco, it's fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. And also, please keep up the work. I think ClimateTech needs quite some attention and also, in a way, gets that, also gets a lot of money. And I think together can do quite some change for good here.
Yeah, we need to tell stories like yours.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for listening to another ClimateTech podcast. It would mean a lot if you would subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. Get in touch anytime with tips and guest recommendations at hello@climatetechpod.com. Find me, Ryan Grant Little, on LinkedIn. I'll be back with another episode next week. Bye for now. This episode is supported by Grizzle, B2B content to create and capture demand. I first met Grizzle's founder, Tom Watley, 5 years ago at a conference in Dublin. I was so impressed that I signed a deal with him to do all my software company's content that same evening at the pub. Remember that, Tom?
Kinda.
And they're still doing it 2 years after we sold the company because the new owners love Grizzle as much as I do. If you sell B2B, book 30 minutes in Tom's calendar at grizzle.io/climate. That's GRIZZLE.io/climate.